Hey guys, it's NormanRebates. Today I just wanted to create a less formal video and kind of talk about this new Netflix movie. But before I get into it, I just want to say I'm sorry for any background noise. I'm house sitting for my grandma right now. I'm in a much more open space, so there's probably a lot of echo. The chair I'm sitting in is, as you can hear, very squeaky. And her dog might walk around, he's got long nails, and he'll click on the floor and things like that. So I'm sorry in advance for any background noise and any weird sounds and background noise. I promise there's not any ghosts in this house. It's just me not being able to sit still while I record a video in a wide open space as my grandma's house. So the movie I'm going to talk about is called Malevolent. So before I get into it, I just want to say this movie, Malevolent, has 3 stars on Rotten Tomatoes, about 3 stars on Roger Ebert, and about 2.5, 2 3/4 stars on IMDb. And before I, start trashing it, this is just my personal opinion. I don't hate this movie. It's better executed than a lot of the big blockbuster movies that have been produced and presented to us on a silver platter for the past couple of years. But it's still not the best horror movie I've ever seen. And maybe later on I'll tell you guys my favorite horror movie, but for right now we're just going to talk about Malevolent. And like I said, this is just my opinion. This is not, if you like Malevolent, if you think it's a great movie and things like that, feel free to love the movie and ignore my opinion because it's just, like I said, my opinion. So all of my notes are handwritten because I didn't want to have to keep switching tabs to write them, so if you hear a lot of rustling and moving around, that's my notes. I'm sorry about all that. I'm kind of a minimum effort person. I don't want to have to pause the movie a whole bunch of times to take a bunch of notes. I also want to say I saw the second half of the movie before I went back and watched the first half because my mom was watching it and I live with my parents right now because I'm planning on going back to school. So, we're going to jump into it right now and we're going to talk about this movie, Malevolent. So it starts with this really corny quote. The first thing you see in this entire movie is a black screen with white text, which a lot of the times personally annoys me when that's how you start your movie. I don't care if you do that halfway through or at the end of the movie, but when you start your movie with a quote, I'm sorry, I hate that, it annoys me. It's almost like you're telling me how to think about this movie before I can even see any of the main characters or any of the action going on. But anyway, this corny quote, it says, "None of the dead come back, but some stay." And I do want to say that yes, I do believe in ghosts, I do believe in the paranormal, but I'm a little more skeptical about what I consider paranormal than some people. Some people, they see an orb or they hear a noise and they immediately think it's a ghost. I need a little bit more to it before I am willing to consider it being a haunting. But anyway, it starts with this corny quote, "None of the dead come back, but some stay." This is taking place in, I think, Glasgow? I think the entire movie's taking place in Glasgow in 1986. These 2 main characters are Jackson and Angela, and they're brother and sister, and they're with Beth and, I think, Eli? Beth and Eli, I want to say. And they are this group of fake paranormal investigators. They fake these paranormal encounters for money to fuel Jack's drug habit. And, I mean, you go through this movie, I hated Jack through the entirety of this movie. Except for the very end. I'm not going to spoil the end of the movie because it's a lot. And if you're interested in seeing the movie after this, be my guest, go watch it, and form your own opinions about this movie, because just because I didn't like the movie doesn't mean you're not going to like it and you're not going to think it's a great movie. And that's not to say I don't like the movie at all, because like I said, there are some things that I enjoyed about the movie and there are some things that I didn't enjoy. It's just kind of it's personal opinion. You go through this movie thinking that Jackson is a major asshole, and you would be mostly right in that. He, like I said, has a drug problem. He owes his drug dealer and his grandfather an exorbitant amount of money. The movie opens up after this quote, and they're basically knocking over a widower and his child. Let that sink in for a minute. They're knocking over a widower and his child for money. And it's like they're not even trying. Angela and Eli and Beth are trying, but not Jackson. Jackson's whole thing, he's only in this for the money. So as soon as the tape, because they've got a tape recorder playing all these sounds and these voices. As soon as the voice that's supposed to be Maddie, the ghost, says, "I'm leaving, I'm gone, goodbye forever," Jackson immediately jumps into the dude with, "Okay, you can pay Beth, I have to go see my sister and make sure she's okay." Like I said, I am not a big fan of Jackson. It's hinted that Angela might be using drugs to make her whole act, because her whole act is she's a medium. And it's hinted very briefly in the very beginning that she might be using drugs to make it more believable that she's a medium. I don't know how much I believe that, because it's only hinted in the very beginning. There's no mention of it. We don't see any evidence of her using drugs, but it's very lightly hinted at in the very beginning of the movie. The film makes use of a lot of your usual spooky music to make the atmosphere more haunting. I know half of all horror movies, it's the atmosphere, but the music is so over the top that it's almost gross. And I don't mean gross as in, ew, what the fuck, that's disgusting. It almost makes you feel nasty. I don't know how to explain it. It just makes me feel weird that all of this music is so over the top and so extensive throughout the whole movie. Of course, it makes use of your spooky mannequins and your jump scares. Then you see that Angela's actually having real paranormal experiences. And that's interesting because the whole shtick of their little paranormal group is that Angela inherited her psychic abilities from her mother. And as we continue on through the movie, there's a scene where Angela's talking to her grandfather, and her grandfather, who is an alcoholic, her mother also was pulling this whole thing, and you see the same things because her grandfather mentions that the mother would talk about hearing voices and seeing things, and she would get nosebleeds, and her grandfather believes it was a gimmick, but you're seeing the exact same things happen to Angela. And I do want to say, I did like the character of Angela through this movie, despite not liking the majority of the rest of the movie through a lot of the things that happen. I did like Angela. She was a very interesting, likable character. You can see that she's got a lot of demons and a lot of darkness to her. And she's really the main character of this story, and everybody else is just a secondary character because you don't get a lot of Jackson's backstory and what makes him basically such a jerk. You don't see anything about Eli and Beth. You're just getting her backstory through most of this movie. We're made to believe that she really is a medium, and I think that yes, she's a medium, because obviously the movie is spoon-feeding it to us on a silver platter that yes, she's a medium, she's seeing ghosts, she's hearing things, she's getting the nosebleeds. She is supposed to be this medium. Her mom actually killed herself, and because she really was a medium, like I said. After they basically bump over this widower and his child, and they go back to the place that they're living. I think it's probably kind of like a brownstone. It's kind of like a bunch of houses that are all connected together, but they're separate. This is before she goes and talks to her grandpa. She has a box of letters and pictures from her mother and things that are related to her mother and her mother's abilities, and she's looking through the box. She wakes up that morning before she goes and visits her grandpa and gets a call from Mrs. Green. Now, Mrs. Green, I'm not going to spoil it. She's an interesting character in this movie. Mrs. Green tells her that she can't handle the screaming anymore. And Angela asks who's screaming, and Mrs. Green says, "The girls." Angela then tells her they're not accepting clients at the moment. Angela goes off and she goes to the college that she's going to, and she goes and sees her grandpa, and then they end up going anyway after you see Jackson get beat up by his drug dealer, and all of this interesting stuff happens. They decide to go to the house. And like I said, I'm not going to spoil it, but the whole story that's told to them is that Mrs. Green's son killed these 3 girls and propped them up in the garden in a circle. And I love that horror movies always use the bodies were found in a circle trope. Why are circles creepy? Probably because of the connection to rituals and things like that, but that's another topic for another time. This house It's pretty spooky, but every time there's something spooky that happens, there's this really annoying screeching track that plays. And I am not a huge fan of the way horror movies over the top just put tons and tons and tons of annoying, loud, screeching tracks. It was okay in Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho to put the screaming violins in there, but ever since that movie hit the fame that it hit, it has become a constant in horror, and I don't really like it very much that the screeching noise is your signal for something scary happening. Because number one, it gives away way too much that this is supposed to be scary. It's telling you how to feel. But I won't get into that. That's another opinion for another time. It's hinted that Mrs. Green knows something about their whole situation being fake, but I want to remain as spoiler-free as possible. Elliot has it's Elliot, it's not Eli. Elliot has a big fat boner for Angela. It's obvious through the whole movie. There's a creepy song that plays that only Angela can hear, which means she really is a medium, right? But I think I'm going to cut that short there. I don't want to spoil the whole movie. I do want to say that the ending is kind of a trip, but if you're anything like me, you can predict the endings of horror movies pretty decently, and it wasn't too much of a shocker. It was just spooky and kind of there. I wasn't scared through most of the whole movie, but there were a lot of jump scares and moments where your whole body is cringing. But overall, though I wasn't a huge fan of the movie, it wasn't terrible. Like I said, it was better executed than a lot of the big box, the prepackaged horror that you get that has a lot of the same storylines and a lot of the same characters in it. And I do think it's interesting that the whole gimmick of her inheriting her mother's gift actually ends up being real. I really liked that touch. But overall, I'm not a huge fan of Malevolent. It wasn't my favorite thing on the planet, but if you liked this movie, go ahead and tell me why you liked this movie in the comments. But that's going to be pretty much it. Thanks guys for stopping by. If you want to see more haunting content, be sure to click subscribe and like, comment, and share on this video. It would be great help. It would be a great help to me and a great help to the channel. But anyway, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.